Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I'm East Forest. Thank you so much for joining us for this last episode of 2021. Yes, as we all know, it doesn't need to be said, it's been a wild year, but nonetheless, we've had some really amazing conversations throughout the year, and that's really what it's all about, is continuing to talk and, more importantly, learning how to listen. And that's one of my favorite things about this podcast, is I get a chance to really create the stage for me to listen. And even people that I know well, like my partner Radha, having time and space to listen to her, I learned so much, and I feel like it's a richer experience. And I guess for you, as you listen to the podcast, it's very much a listening experience, and there's something about that, and maybe why we enjoy this medium. But anyway, it's fun. There's so many beautiful moments from this last year. This is by no means the quote-unquote best. These were just some that I went through and grabbed that I thought would be fun to highlight. So I put in the show notes who is speaking in which order, but I'll just tell you briefly. We've got our friend Dr. Harry Grammer. We've got Radha Wepner, John Hopkins, the one and only, Jeremy Narby, Tiffany Shalane, Bob Thurman, Peter Broderick, David Bronner of Dr. Bronner's, Blake Spalding, Brian Murarescu, and Justin Wren at the end. So it was really fun going through, because I got to, for myself, kind of go back in memory lane and hear some of these special moments that I kind of only heard once. And then I was like, oh, right. Oh, that was sweet. What a sweetie. So I think you'll enjoy it too. I hope you had a good holiday, and I hope you have a wonderful New Year's, wherever you are and however this is panning out for you. Rod and I had some family time before and after the actual Christmas holiday. We celebrated more on the solstice, which was serendipitous, because that seems like the thing to celebrate in a sense. It seems like that's what everything's really modeling and revolving around, and we ended up having that be the day when we could all do it. So we had sort of a soul mass, or a Christol. These were various formations of saying what it was, but it was awesome. And then yesterday, on the holiday of Christmas, we got to just be together and use that time for a personal connection of just diving into just doing a deep meditation and shamanic journey, and it was really valuable. Really very valuable. We actually got a chance to test some music that I'm prepping for the January 8th Journey Space journey. So I'm creating it's like a new Music for Mushrooms version. They're outtakes from other ceremonies, and I put it together to make a 4-hour musical guidance, and kind of thought we should test it out. And I'm always blown over when I kind of go into that space and then listen to that work, and it's like somebody else created it, and I'm so humbled to be able to take the journey. And anyway, it felt like it worked. And if you're free on January 8th, consider joining us, journeyspace.com, and see if you want to be in a small group, because what I realized in this journey, and I think what makes Journey Space special, but is the witnessing. You know, when something is witnessed, it is amplified. It becomes richer. When, like the music I make in ceremonies, there are other people there journeying, and that sort of relationship, that mechanism in itself, is what invites a kind of magic, the witnessing. And the same is done by you when you're in a small group in Journey Space. It's virtual, but you're there with everybody online. You go on these journeys together, and then go through integration circles. It's powerful to do that. You know, I was thinking, like, when people go in to do ketamine therapy with Radha, and let's say trauma and grief is often coming up, I was noting that I think maybe it's more potent for people, more powerful for them when they grieve if it's witnessed by another versus doing it alone. That's valuable too, but is this even more so? So that was something that came up for me as we were going through that. And so if you want to hear that music right now, that would be the only way, on January 8th, journeyspace.com. And I will be in the real world in Portland, Oregon, on New Year's Day, 1/1/2022. as something. There's a thing called Renew, RE:new. That's at the Bossa Nova Ballroom, and I'll be playing on New Year's Day. I think around 9 or something like that. But you can go over to eastforest.org if you want to come to that show and check it out for the tickets. Everything else I can't quite announce yet, besides the dates we have going on in the UK and Ireland in April. That's happening and on the website. Everything else is still kind of in the cooker, but we'll get it out to you soon. Lots of exciting things. I'm very much looking forward to the new year. I don't know what a lot of it holds. I mean, do we ever? But I really don't, at least on my end. And I was spending a lot of time yesterday searching for that clarity for myself. Like what do I want it to hold? And where do I want to go? Where do I want to point the ship? So I invite you to think about that as you move into the new year, just where you want to point the ship of your life. And then from there, you roll with the seas and the storms and the sunshines and the birds and the dolphins that may come along your ship. That's right. I said dolphins. Okay, so we're going to dive into this best of 2021 from the 10 Laws podcast. Thank you so much. We'll catch you soon. So do you feel like for those who want to provide help to their communities, or even more broadly their communities, is it a question of making opportunities, like gifts essentially? It's like just there's sort of whatever gifts you have or ways that you might want to be able to help. It's sort of making that available.
Oh yeah. I encourage, that if you do have a gift to give it away. I think that's the greatest, that's the greatest gift in life. And of course, I mean, we all have to make a living at some point. You can't give away meditation or meditation practices, or you can't, you eventually need to, make a living or not. I don't like to use have tos, because I was homeless for quite some time, and I could have stayed there easily and found a way to make my life work. But I had a mission that I needed to go out and begin to take on. So, yeah, I do believe that, if you have a gift, why not give it away? People ask me all the time, what can I do? And especially after this last year, with what's happened with social justice and, and folks coming forth, about this time last year, most if not all of um, white people in my community, right, were asking, Harry, what should I do? This is happening, and I'm feeling this experience of like not doing enough. I should be a part of this movement. What can I do? What should I do? And I tell people all the time, first, if it's in these communities that are sort of if communities that are sort of, deserts for, spiritual tools, for food, for, just all around support. First thing that you do is that you get proximate. You get proximate to the issue. You don't really want to come in and say, hey, I've got this sort of this, I've got the answer for you. You want to get proximate. You want to connect with organizations that are doing the work. You want to you want to connect with churches or whatever's in the community that is for where the people are and where the people gather. And you want to listen. Get proximate and listen. And then when you feel and see the time is right and you see that your gift can apply to supporting the actual situation or the overall situation, then you can begin to ask if you can offer that gift, to the people or to those people directly. I think that's the way to do it. Other than that, anytime I'll just use a story. A friend of mine, she had gone to Sri Lanka about 10 years ago, and she gets to Sri Lanka and she was there with an organization that was, bringing food. They were bringing food to the children of Sri Lanka. Well, while she was there, of course, it was the first time she had ever seen the toilets that are in India and in Sri Lanka. Mm-hmm. And if you've been to India before, there's a lot of squatting, right? And everywhere you go, you got to squat. So she's like, you know what? I'm going to create a cause to bring more toilets to Sri Lanka, that people can sit on and they can do their due. Well, that was a big fail, right? So she realized that people didn't actually want those toilets. I did the same thing when I was in Africa. I was out in Tanzania, in Arusha, Tanzania once, and me and a friend of mine were out working with the community, and we saw these kids in a park, and they were kicking around a deflated soccer ball. And they're kicking it around. They're just having a great time. But a friend of mine and I had an idea. We're like, you know what? We're gonna go to the grocery store. We're gonna get another soccer ball. We're gonna pump it up, and then you're gonna gift these kids, and we're gonna surprise them with this soccer ball. So we came back an hour later with this soccer ball, and pridefully we just sort of rolled the soccer ball out on the field, and kids looked at it. They kicked it around for about 10 minutes, man. And then they went back and got their deflated soccer ball and kept playing their game. So it's the same thing here, right? We've got to be listening enough to know what is the need. What do people actually need? Do they need my soccer ball? Do they need the toilets that I want to bring forth, or do they just need someone to listen and someone to be witness? You know what? I think sometimes witness is enough, right? I think sometimes, in these situations where people are going through really hard times through COVID, through racial injustice, and I think sometimes when friends of mine who are Caucasian, who are white, ask me what to do, I say just go get proximate and witness, be witness to it, just be there to understand and to hear, what's going on, because that's a thing that's I think is missing a lot, because there's a lot of folks that are debating in politics and people talking over people. Sometimes it's just, let's be in a room and let's just be. And it's really hard for us to do that sometimes.
Well, like we spoke of in the beginning, I feel like all of this is actually in some ways great, that people are going deeper and going into the shadow and doing a deep reckoning, which we're doing on a collective scale with all of, the social justice work that's at such a forefront. Like, that's shadow work that's happening because as a country and a collective, we're going deeper and can now face that and actually talk about it together. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
It's going to be painful and awkward going through it, but what healing is on the other side of it.
So that's why we need those cheerleaders to say we can do this, because it's inevitably, there's no way for it not to be messy and mistakes to be made. There's no way.
Well, like you said, school and learner, having the attitude of learner, even for myself, like I don't have the answers and I'm going to make mistakes and I can be okay with that, versus the survival trauma mindset that we're all raised with of like, if you get the answer wrong, you're wrong.
And you're done. They kick you out of school.
Yeah.
You can never go back to school.
And there's a winner and a loser, and there's a first place, and you want to win. It's like, well, that in itself is a faulty mindset and belief system. Like if I can just feel like I can make mistakes and I'm not afraid of that, I'm not afraid of being kicked out of the community because I made a mistake, and I'm not going to kick you out because you made a mistake, there's a sense of then safety there.
Yeah.
And we can now learn together.
There is a basic instinct to not want to be kicked out of the tribe.
You would die.
Yeah. And so when that happens, when we do that these days, I think we know on a certain level, this is one of the worst things we can do to you, is to excommunicate you.
Cancel.
Right. That's the modern term for excommunication. It's the digital excommunication, but that is the main kingdom now, is the noosphere, is the internet. It's the digital landscape of our lives, which is a huge part of our connectivity. It's the connective tissue of who we are. And so when we're like, say, we'll excoriate you on it if you're on it, and if you're off it, please just disappear, essentially. It's cruel. It really is cruel. And in a lot of ways, it's dodging what's at hand. It's like, well, it's clearly, we all have then, now it looks like it's triggering various traumas here. So it's like, do we want to grow and learn together, or do we want to just avoid it and make more traumas? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's harder to, dig in there and learn and because you don't always know. You're like, well, I don't know why I feel this way, or I have no clue how to like not feel this way.
That's why it's called your shadow, because it doesn't have form, you can't see it, and you don't really know it. It's sneaky. You don't know. I mean, my parts of my shadows that I've discovered, I was so unaware of.
Such as?
A lot, let's just say. But I'm becoming more and more aware. But just to hold that space for, yes, you don't know. You don't know what it is. And someone else might be able to see it, right? From the outside looking in. But it's not the same.
Trauma. Marsha.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying for myself. It is. I know what you're like. This is going. I sort of sympathizing with you about how we're tired.
We're tired.
You know, and in a lot of ways, like this work is great, but let's be honest. Like you got to have times of nourishment and reflection.
Fully.
And we're kind of being hit all the time now, and so I think for a lot of us, we are just like edgy and exasperated.
Yeah.
This is, I've never even said this before, but like sometimes when things feel really in a flow and then your mind notices that and the audience is there, and then there's a voice that comes in that's sort of like the critical, like, well, what if the power goes out, or what if is the computer this? And I'm like, it's the meditation or actually the moments from psychedelic spaces that allow me to sort of love that thought and just be like, it's okay, back into it, back into it. It's just this constant sort of like clenching and releasing. The tension of the moment.
That's life, clenching and releasing. Sounds unpleasant.
It is life.
But that reminded me of something. So when I was a teenager, I was at the Royal College of Music on the Saturdays, which they had like a junior department, and I had piano lessons with a really high level piano teacher called Emily Jeffrey, who was incredible and changed my life because she got me into proper classical piano training, and she got my finger technique up to an incredible level that I wouldn't have had a chance or been inspired to do. And I found it really hard at first and wasn't that engaged, but she managed to get me fully inspired. And the results of that I can, when I'm in practice, I can access that again. So I can be quite virtuosic, and that was really useful on the Polarity Tour. But briefly, I thought, okay, maybe I'll be a classical pianist and that'll be my job. This
wow,
was me
really?
When I was a teenager, yeah. And then I had one concert which changed my mind forever. I won this competition at the Royal College of Music, which meant, and the prize of it was that you played a concerto with the orchestra to an audience in this grand concert hall. And that to me didn't really feel like a prize so much as a horrific, an unbelievable punishment. But I've never felt pressure like that in my life, and it went really well in terms of how it was received. But my experience of it was hellish, and there was, I played Ravel's Piano Concerto in G, which is incredibly technically complicated and utterly beautiful. But there was a point which I'll never forget. Bear in mind, there's no sheet music. You've learnt it all by this point. You've been playing it for months. There's this point where I was just like looking down at my hands, and they were doing all this shit, and I was like, just for a second, that very same voice you just talked about, it came in and it said, what are they doing?
What is happening here?
What are your fingers doing? It's like, but rather than have any, being a 16-year-old with no experience of, what that voice is, no understanding of how that voice can be bypassed or transcended, I just froze. I mean, I didn't freeze. Like somehow the fingers kept going, but I managed to freeze that part of my brain out of sheer necessity until I got to the end. But it was such an awful experience that I then and there essentially decided that I will never do that as a job. And it's like, also it wasn't really creative enough to play other people's music. But yeah, that voice is terrifying.
Was that an element of it, though, the fact that it was someone else's music that made it harder or scarier? Whereas, because you kind of did continue with the job, but you changed the way you did it.
Yeah, so if you're improvising and it's yours, there is no wrong anyway. And because I play I play by ear and without thinking of scales or anything like that. So if some weird notes creep in, you can weave them in. Originally I'm a piano player, so I feel increasingly comfortable just doing that. But it's as soon as you bring in all the other elements and there's and people and other humans as well. Things get much more complicated.
Yeah. That's the thing with playing solo versus having other members. It definitely changes the dynamic of what you play in the moment and so forth, and what's planned and all that kind of stuff. I really wanted to ask you about some music and the role of music, Ikaros, the healing songs that he's talked about. It's one of the things you can learn from ayahuasca. And myself, as a musician, this is something I'm interested in and talk about a lot. What do you feel is the role of music in the psychedelic landscape? Let's just start there.
Okay, well, how about in the ayahuasca landscape, and then we can move on to the psychedelic landscape.
Let's just stick with ayahuasca for now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's an anthropologist who's written very well on this subject. His name is Peter Gow. That's G-O-W. The book is called An Amazonian Myth and Its History. It may sound a little bit academic, but still. This guy spent time living with the Piro people, kind of just next door from the Ashaninka people where I was living with. And this is what he says. And to me, it's the best kind of summary of what's going on. People, Amazonian people who take ayahuasca say that in their ayahuasca visions, they perceive entities that are common to all life forms that they call essences or mothers or fathers. So like the mother of ayahuasca. So each species has an entity like this. And if you pay attention in your vision to these entities, you notice that they give off a vibration or a melody. And that the job of the shaman is to sing along with these entities and to learn their melodies. And these melodies are the essence of these beings. And so that you can, if you can remember the melody and then sing it later, you can call them. They're saying that the essences that animate life forms themselves have an essence, which is a melody. Do it again. The essence of living organisms is a melody.
It's beautiful.
Or a bunch of melodies. And that what these melodies are, they correspond ultimately to beings that are made of knowledge and that are music. And what the shaman does by hanging out with these entities is learn the different melodies that go with different species. And the more Ikaros or shamanic song that a shaman has, it's more like a university professor. The more books she's written, the more powerful she is. So that's where we are with Ikaros. And the interface, the possible interface, if you take these beings that can be perceived in visual hallucinations or visions, call them what you want, we can't emit visions, but we can emit sound. We can sing. These melodies emit sound. These entities, emit sound, and they are made of sound. What we have in common, the only thing that we have in common with these invisible entities is sound. We can listen to their melody, and then we can replay it. And it seems that they actually like hearing their own melody. So the music, it's not only that it's the essence of living beings, it's also, it's the common substrate that we have with that invisible level.
I love everything you're saying. It just lights me up inside. The essence of the essence. I love this idea of the beings almost like enjoying hearing the reverberation of their own music. And it's so poetic.
And then there's just a little bit more,
Please.
which is that according to Peter Gao, according to the Piro, and these are things that I've been able to confirm with other indigenous Amazonian people. It's just that Peter Gao wrote it down first, and it was so clear. It's that so shamans put themselves in the presence of these entities. They pay attention to the melodies that they emit, and then they sing along with them to learn the melody. And singing along with them and singing their songs and learning their melodies, they start to see from their point of view. And when you start to see from the point of view of these powerful entities, this is both a very rich experience in terms of knowledge, and therefore in terms of power. It's also dangerous because you start looking at humans from the outside, from the point of view of these powerful entities. You start looking at humans like a jaguar might look at a human. This is dangerous. So you want the shaman to go and speak with the level of reality of the indigenous of the invisible entities, because you get knowledge from there. You get knowledge that you wouldn't have otherwise. But the shaman can be transformed by that experience and can come back knowledgeable, powerful, but dangerous. And so that is, we're not in music as entertainment here. We're in music as knowledge and power that can also be ambiguous. So that's what is behind the whole question of Icaros.
Do you have much knowledge or experience with the role of music with psilocybin from an anthropological standpoint?
No, just from a personal standpoint.
Please, I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm a friend of psilocybin mushrooms, and I think it's pretty clear that, for example, one thing that one experiences, psilocybin for me is often more auditory than visual. And so it's actually inclined towards sound and being attentive to sound. I think it also privileges the human voice. In other words, when you have taken psilocybin, you become aware of the power of your speech, of what comes out of your mouth, of the sounds. And then obviously, as with other hallucinogens, the music has a serious impact on the visions, on the experience. And this is also true in the Amazon. People would not dream of taking ayahuasca and then there being no music, not singing Icaros or not playing an instrument. The idea that you would take ayahuasca and then just spend the whole evening in silence is not part of their culture. And I think that's also been fairly clear for most people interested in psychedelics. And in fact, psychedelics have had a big impact on kinds of music that people have made as well. So clearly there's something that's going on between music and the world of vision. There's another fellow who wrote another interesting book and brought up an important point about music and hallucinations. His name is Benny Shannon, and his book is The Antipodes of the Mind, Charting the Phenomenology of the Ayahuasca Experience. It also sounds fairly academic, but it's a pretty enjoyable read. And the point he makes about music is that when you are in the hallucinatory realm or experience, everything can be transformed in terms of images, sounds, tastes, all the senses can experience transformation, and more or less anything in the outside world can seem transformed. The only thing that does not cease being itself is music. Music remains recognizable as music. And this is perhaps one of the reasons why ayahuasqueros tell people, if the visions get too strong, then hang on to the melody. It's like a lifeline. You know, you may be drowning in your visions. Well, concentrate on the melody and just hold on to that melody, and it'll get you out of the tough spot. And so there, I think music may also be central for the reason that it remains fairly constant, unlike most everything else in the hallucinatory realm.
We are held. In a lot of ways, a lot of tech out there is just putting gas on the fire of grabbing our attention. It's sort of the opposite of the water that would put it out. That's reflection. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's just a recognition that, like you said, you lose yourself in your sense of time, because that's what it's designed to do. That's literally its main attempt, is how long can we keep you on the platform? And it's like, we, at the end of the day, have to recognize our own volition and power. There's nothing else that's going to step us and like subvert this process other than ourselves. And a lot of us, probably all of us at this point, it's been about 10 solid years of like going deep into the iPhone. Totally. We recognize its pull and its problems, and how we're all, I think, unhappy on a certain level with our relationship to it. And we all want to make certain levels of change. I would say almost all of us, but it's just an inability to know how to make any change that's meaningful, or that will last.
You just said something that I love so much, is that you lose your sense of time. I mean, think about it. The gambling casinos, like, you never know what time it is, right?
And they design it that way. Yeah.
They take out the windows. You don't know what time it is. And it's like when we're on these phones, it's so that we lose our sense of time. But these Shabbat moments, whether it's a full day of Shabbat, or it's meditation, or it's being conscious of what you're eating, or is to not lose your sense of time, is to be present for your sense of time. And I think people have a lot of sense of shame around the screen, whether they admit it or not. If their kids are on it too much, if they're on it too much, you just feel bad. Like, sometimes it feels good, and then there's this point it feels bad, and then I start to feel like dirty. Like, what did I just spend 2 hours doing?
A recognition of your own lack of control, and inside you're like, I'm not really in control.
Right. And so that's why I think this ancient technology of Shabbat is like this beautiful idea that a lot of people do, that people should try. And I really hold your hand on how to really do it, because people have forgotten that it's not that hard. I think people just have a lot of fear. Going back to what you just said, is they put all their power into the phone. They think that everything powerful is in that phone, but you don't realize you are powerful. Reclaim your own power. Your thoughts are powerful. Your intentions are powerful. But when you succumb to the phone, it's like you're giving away all your power to the phone. And you're saying, I can only feel good if the phone's around. But really, when I turn it off, I have this heightened sense of returning to myself. And what am I thinking? It's like groupthink. People are texting you, you're responding, you're in a constant state of reaction to the news, to the email, to the text. And when I turn it off, it's like, wait, I'm not reacting. I'm just like, what am I really feeling right now? What do I really? Very different.
In some ways, like, the constant response is demeaning the power of your responses and your thoughts and what you are choosing. And maybe another way to think about it is like, well, it is hard, but it's simple. A recognition that, like, no, these pulls are quite strong, and for a lot of us, and in some ways, that's the most human thing about us, is we've been hijacked. It's like, it's very human to be this addicted, because it's pulling on the heartstrings of what's most important to us,
right?
And that's to be seen. But we're being seen by something that's one-sided, but we want it to be two-sided. And that's why when you went to the concerts or you're in person with someone, it is so nourishing, fulfilling, because it's the real thing. But we're being pushed into this digital lifestyle, which has many benefits, but it also has, in some ways, it has a cost. You know, it has a price.
Yeah.
Oh, how much fun am I having? Is it good enough? Never. It's never good enough. So that happiness is not only is it not worth being pursued, in other words, a pleasure opposed to pain, which therefore is disregarding the pain of others. In other words, it's a closed, self-closing kind of pleasure. It's not very strong pleasure. You know, we've seen a certain person who's proud of how many women's private parts he's grabbed in his life and shouts about it with joy and delight. He doesn't resign from anything. But the point is, he obviously never enjoyed anyone that he ever had. He had some pretty beautiful women friends, but he couldn't be satisfied with any of them. Why? Because he didn't feel the opening, streaming, he didn't get into the zone himself. He was sitting there thinking, he was narrating himself. Oh, I got a new one now. I can do this and I can do that. And it's all me and this and that, and then throw them aside. So he never opened to real happiness, to bliss, in other words. That's why I'm not talking happiness, I'm talking bliss. You know, that's where you're blown away. When you're blown away is before you turn around and evaluate how blown away was that. Oh, no, I prefer the Rolling Stones. The Beatles are boring. Oh, no, I want heavy metal. Oh, no. In other words, put an end to it, you know. When your concepts come and clamp on it, when your ego concept comes in and clamps on you, when your ego finds the joy of being one with the other and get ready to give itself away, that's bliss.
I hear you almost defining it's like dualistic bliss when it's just about you, and when it's sort of recognizing that everyone's bliss, is your bliss. There's one bliss.
That's right.
And
you're in the zone.
Yeah.
And then you're in. It's like the runner, you know, who hits the zone, and when they're in the zone, they don't even know they're running. They don't count it. They don't feel it. They have a different energy because everything's working like they're asleep. They're not running. Oh, my muscle and. Their mind is not distracted. They're 100% with the motion. Or the great artists, when they're playing their piano or doing whatever they do, and they're losing themselves in the music. The great drummer who just gets lost. It's one Japanese one. You know that guy? I forgot his name. He's he's an icon, an idol in Japan. He often dislocates his shoulders during his drum concerts.
Wow.
And he has to go to have a doctor and put them back together again, tape them up. He gets so into it, he just goes wild, you know, and it's hurt. He goes beyond the ability of his body, you know, and that's that takes a kind of special developed personality, which everybody does. Look at how people are with TikTok and Instagram, and those reels that you see on Instagram where everybody's doing some steps, you know. And they're walking across the street. Suddenly they break into steps, and everybody wants to be an artist instead of just walking across the street. And they're ready for it. And that's the mass of people. So therefore, unfortunately, they're very manipulable by the uptight people who they just want to own the Pentagon. They want more dollars. And what are they going to do with the dollars? You can't even make a nice mattress out of a stash of $1,000 bills. You know, Jeff Bezos could have $1 million bills if there was such a thing printed. Fill a mattress with it and roll in it. And it wouldn't give him any pleasure at all.
Wow.
Yeah, well, thanks for diving in. I appreciate it.
Hey, before we go, I was going to ask you if this might sound a bit weird, but I had this idea of just trying to do some sort of spontaneous improvised drone duet with our voices for people.
Yeah,
because you know, it's kind of funny because we're through this technology and there's delays and glitches and stuff, but I just was more curious than anything as to what would happen if we just try and sing together for a moment through that.
Well, I'm curious if I can throw on reverb. Here, hold on. Because I'm coming.
Ooh,
do you hear that?
You got reverb. Wait, I have some reverb too. Hang on.
Well, because I'm on my Apollo.
I have some delay. Check this out. Can you hear that? Can you hear that?
Yes. Out there, particularly for psilocybin, that's designed for that. There's plenty of music that can work pretty well with it, but if you think like the Icaros and ayahuasca ceremony, from their lineage, that is the ceremony. That is what's calling forth the spirits of the medicine. Is the songs. They're critical, and so it's sort of like I felt the need for us to build that tradition into the new Western sort of psychedelic therapeutic movement.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And that's, I think like music, it's like the same kind of mode of consciousness that psychedelics, it's in a way it just really facilitates and helps that experience, because that's where you need to be. You need to be on that wavelength.
It's transdimensional music. Yeah.
Right on. And get out of that kind of linear thinking, whatever kind of mode of being. And so as far as heals, like the controversy, like was this going to be like really controversial? I mean, absolutely. I thought this was going to be much more controversial than it turned out to be. I mean, we sell into Walgreens, Walmart, Target, all the mass market accounts, as well as natural food stores, and and we were totally activist about how we do it. And this was obviously one of the most activist things we've done, is like to put a label all about psychedelic healing into, mainstream stores. We figured that, it'd be in there for a few weeks and then we'd have to swap it out, in a lot of cases. But we did not have one retailer complain at all. And Walgreens, in fact, we gave them one of our regular labels for an ad they were running in store, and they wanted to heal soul.
Is that because they're really aware of, for instance, are they actually reading it? Or they're just kind of like, is it more of a surface pop level? Like, yeah, that looks cool. Or people are starting to be into this, so we want it too. Like, what's the corporate vibe there in response?
Well, you know what? Like my brother, company president, Mike Bronner, he's awesome. And he said, like, what our intention here with this label is to communicate in a way my mom's church group can receive. Like just to make it.
You can't argue with it.
Yeah, you can't argue with it, man. We put this in the most straightforward, just breaking it down Like, look, we've got epidemics of depression, anxiety. FDA's given these medicines breakthrough status. Like, it's time to destigmatize this conversation and mainstream and rationalize it. And so, I think, just the way we kind of laid it out just made it a lot less, controversial than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, that's a big ethos of mine too. I try to present things in a way that it's hard to argue with it. Like there's sort of a universality of it, or you're not even using certain words that have a connotation now that maybe they have more baggage, right? And so it's like, okay, we'll put those aside. There's another word that's, that can work for just about everybody.
No, 100%, man. And that's Rick and Roland. Like, that's why psilocybin and MDMA were picked, not LSD. I mean, LSD's just got way too much baggage, and you say LSD, and it's just like everybody's got all kinds of opinions and associations. But psilocybin, like, what's that? And so that's a really, really key point. Like, kind of avoiding trigger words that trigger unnecessary associations to what's actually the subject,
sure,
and the issue. Yeah,
that's amazing. And so you've been sort of leading the charge in this sort of conscious capitalism way as a company, and it seems from the outside like that's been a benefit for you as opposed to a hindrance. Like, do you feel like it's made it harder to do business in this very capitalistic world, or has it helped?
No, I think it's helped. I think we're showing that you can be a social venture. So we're a benefit corp. It's this new corporate form where generally a C corp or S corp will your one and only purpose is to maximize shareholder return. And if you're not doing that, you can be sued. So like if we had outside shareholders, we could be sued for giving all our money away. They're saying like, oh, you're not maximizing my profit. And a benefit corp is a new form that allows you to enshrine purposes other than maximizing profit. And in our case, basically, our purpose is like we can give as much profit as we want to whatever socially and environmentally beneficial causes as we feel are important. And we're now legally protected in doing that if we had to bring on shareholders for whatever reason. And as far as the success of the model, I mean, there's just so many people that really do want to buy products that haven't gone to hell and back, that are doing good in the world, and are willing to pay a reasonable. I mean, our soaps are maybe somewhat more expensive than other soaps, but they're not ridiculous. There's not a ridiculous premium to them, and that just enables us to, not screw over our workers or our farmers or our, suppliers, and do things in the right way. It's good price, it's good value, it's concentrated, it's awesome soap. But yeah, and then I think that all these causes that we engage on, like instead of a marketing budget, we have this, activism budget, and it gets us a lot of earned media, like just a lot of attention and love. And yeah.
Sure.
I have a friend named Rebecca Solnit, who's kind of an extraordinary mind. And in the last couple of years, I did struggle with some mental health stuff and depression. I got really sad for a time. And she has this idea that I really like, which is like, not to be a pessimist, which like a pessimist says, oh, nothing is going to change, so I don't have to participate. Mm-hmm. And an optimist says, oh, things are going to work out fine. Maybe I don't have to participate. Her thing is instead to really find a way to fuel your hope. And the way for me to fuel my hope is to be involved. So my activism and figuring out where can I be of benefit. I pretty much wake up every day and think, how can I be of benefit today? Like
And that doesn't feel also like heavy because there's so much?
No, because I know that I can only do what I can do. I mean, when I'm out of balance, it feels heavy. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling so good. I'm out of balance. Bring it back into noticing. But I think I think a lot about, it's a funny one, but did you ever watch the movie Searching for Sugar Man?
Yeah.
I loved that film, and it's stayed with me.
To me, that's my lighthouse, because I'm like, maybe what is it for me? Like Azerbaijan? Maybe there's a place that I don't know about that East Forest is huge.
Right. But for me, what that film was about, like the takeaway for me was about the good you do that you don't know you do.
Yeah.
Just by showing up and offering what you have to this beautiful, broken world. And I am a really curious person. So I'm very curious about what's to come. I another, like, I don't know, somebody told me, and I don't know if it's true or not, but my understanding is that Einstein had this quote. So if I'm misquoting or misattributing this quote, please forgive me. But something to the effect of like the fundamental question that all humans have to ask for themselves is whether the universe is inherently friendly or unfriendly. And for me, the universe is an inherently friendly place. Horrible, terrifyingly bad things happen, and some of them have happened to me. And yet, I think, like, I have a certain faith that Mother Nature has a wisdom that's so past our ability to conceive of, whether it's, a sort of omniscience, or like what somebody might attribute to God, or, a Buddha. But like that there is a larger pattern. And I am a big fan of the work of Joanna Macy, and her idea of the Great Turning is something I'm really here for. And so for me, I think, like, how can I be of benefit? How can I help? And sometimes it's just noticing that someone's sad and putting your hand on their shoulder and asking, how can I support you? Or sometimes it's offering birdseed to a flock of hungry red-winged blackbirds, who come through my yard looking for food and ransack the place. But I think finding a way to frame your life into, like, kind of a service that's not like heavy mantle, because, so the Buddha taught that all happiness comes from wishing happiness for others, and that all suffering comes from wishing one's own happiness, which is a heavy thing to think about until you really meditate on it. And then you're like, yeah, actually, that is congruent with my experience. Like, when we get small and we're like, I want that thing, and I can't believe they got it and I didn't get it. And instead, like, if you can see that someone has good fortune and you, like, genuinely rejoice, and you're like, oh my gosh, I am so happy that, Krishna and Radha found each other and they have this extraordinary, beautiful love, instead of being like, oh, I'm lonely, I haven't been on a date in 3 years, whatever it is, like to rejoice, then it magnifies, and you feel your heart is full of light and your soul brightens. And
not just in an academic way, but because of what it means to the future of, the future of the society that we inherited from the Greeks and Romans.
There you go. If your hypothesis is true, what do you think it means for people today? Like, how would that change or not change someone who is inside one of these religions or not? What do you think the message is for us now?
I think the message is that as the research continues and as this data plays itself out, the question is, what does it all mean for us? And maybe the answer is we've been here before. Mm. And I think that that's a profound thing to say. It's what Terence McKenna would sometimes say. In some ways, the prophet of the psychedelic renaissance. If I'm paraphrasing Terence, he would often say, if you met someone who didn't know where they were between 1995 and 2005, you'd describe them as a fairly damaged person. And yet, who amongst us knows what was happening in Western civilization between 900 and 1400? Who knows what was happening 1500 years ago? And who knows why this illegal cult called Christianity managed to transform the Roman Empire in a couple hundred years, the single greatest cultural transformation in the history of the West? The answer probably isn't psychedelics, but the answer is something that we should pay attention to. And the answer is something to do with these near-death states of awareness, something to do with the way we experience death, something to do with that great mystery of which we're a part. And I think, if anything, we should be thinking about the contemplative lifestyle, mysticism, and how we fit into this great historical picture, which is tens of thousands of years in the making. And to the extent that we don't have rites of passage today, that we don't have government administered initiation rites, and instead we have Burning Man, and instead we have the Grateful Dead, like, what would it mean if, in fact, the data shows that these ecstatic experiences were part and parcel of who we were and where we came from? What would it mean to reincorporate some of that technology today?
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I would agree that it seems like it is an important part about becoming an adult. And sort of like Bill Plotkin would say, there are very few adults right now. Maybe 15% of us make it to adulthood. Most of us are kind of stuck in young adolescence, and we don't have these rites of passage that help us presage into, being wise and humbled. And I think we need that kind of friction and challenge as a way of seeing more than just like what's right in front of our eyes and in our minds. And so we kind of see that reflected in our culture at large, that we're just kind of a bunch of teenagers running the show, and the people who are actually in the government are, a lot of them, the same way. It's more about greed and egotism and short-term goals. So, yeah, we just need to get everybody dosed up and go through a bunch of, we need to really everyone needs to have a near-death experience, and then they'll be nice and humbled and come back and say, maybe it's about a little bit more till it meets the eye.
Well, there's something very humbling about the psychedelic experience. I don't speak from personal experience, but there's something very humbling about that. Where, again, in this clinical literature, months, years afterwards, people will report being better versions of themselves, humbled as a result of that humbling, which comes from the Latin humus, meaning to the ground. I mean, you're smacked to the ground. And your worldview can sometimes crumble. And in the wake of that crumbling, maybe you are kinder and gentler and more compassionate and more loving. And maybe that's the missing ingredient to our toxic democracy. Maybe democracy wasn't supposed to be the way it is we practice today. There's a big question. What if at the center of our democracy, some kind of initiatory experience that showed us that we're all somehow connected, that showed us that there's this relationship with a Mother Earth that is not a metaphor, that showed us that there's meaning to the cosmos? I mean, this was essential to the survival of ancient Greek civilization. Then democracy comes later, or democracy is on the periphery. To them, it was not taking what you see with your eyes for granted and realizing there's a colossal mystery to be explored. And I wonder how often we explore that in a safe and methodical way.
I would go to, I had the same fire even more to fight for people. And now when I fight in the cage, I've shifted my mantra and everything else. Like, people are like, how do you fight and how do you hurt people? And I'm like, man, it's a competition first. But it's a sport, but it's my platform and it's my voice. It's not even my voice, it's their voice now.
Yeah, your motivation is shifted.
Yeah, it's like when I get in there, I look at pictures. I'm back there listening to their music that we sing around the campfire or the fire, right? Where they took me to school and taught me about their culture. They called it Campfire University. It's where the pygmies would take me to school and teach me their way of life. It's where they taught me 3 incredible Swahili proverbs, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Or the second one, and that's all about tribe, right? That's what I found in me personally, fit for service with Aubrey and so many incredible people. But another Swahili proverb is, if you and me just talking about malaria, this will mean more hopefully now, but because it's tongue in cheek and it's funny. But now that was the biggest opponent of my life, being a mosquito. It's like, wow, like if you think you're too small to make a difference, try to sleep in a closed room with a mosquito. Right? Like if a mosquito can have that much of a difference, you and me, like if there was a mosquito in either one of our, or both of our rooms, we'd both be distracted. And a mosquito almost took me out more than, what's the biggest guy I fought? West Sim, 6'10", 265. You know, I ended up beating him in a minute and a half, but he could have kicked my butt, but he would not have kicked me. It would not have beaten me down as much as a mosquito did. Right. So if that mosquito can have that big of a difference in my life, how much more can you have in the difference of someone else, or make in someone else's life? Right.
Drop of the ocean, as you said, the eyedropper.
Right.
Yeah.
And then another one, which would probably go along with the addiction, is if there is no opponent within, the enemy on the outside can do us no harm. And I love that one, especially coming out of treatment. When I was at treatment, I was thinking for 90 days, about day 30, I almost left. I almost quit and gave up and said, nah, this one isn't for me. Because I didn't go to a green smoothie place in Malibu or Scottsdale, like where they woke me up and gave me massages. I told my team and my board of directors, they were incredible. They said, you know, we're not going to, we've been standing behind you, but now it's time for us to stand beside you and in front of you with a shield. And you need to take this time in treatment and take it as a gift, take it as an opportunity. Don't think of it as a punishment. And when I almost left, it was because I went to a big book boot camp. I went to a 12-step completion program. They kicked out more people than they kept. They talked down to us. They beat you down on your way in, kick you on your way out, you know, beat you down the whole time you're there. And a lot of them needed it, and I needed it. And I'm so grateful for it. It was a gift, even though it was a struggle. Hardest thing I've ever done, probably, but the best thing I've ever done, because guys got sober that had, you know, been to 15 treatment centers because they were heroin addicts. This was the lost cause place, the last resort place, and I decided to go there first. At least
they're not doing like a boga therapy or anything like that, are they?
No, but it'd be great if they probably started doing that.
It might work.
It would work, and I believe, and most likely, and the pygmies do a boga, and so. But that's I've never done it, but they can go in 24, 48, even 72-hour journeys.
Were you there for any of that?
No, it's
pretty rare.
Yeah, pretty rare. And oftentimes I was there with people who didn't approve. I mean, we always did things culturally sound. We never made them feel shame. I think for them, it was so, like, if I went and I was just by myself with one of my really trusted friends, but whenever it was like the outside well drillers and things like that, they kept some things private. They invited me into a lot of it, but that journey was a rite of passage for their boys coming into manhood. And, but it was,
I'm guessing that's something you never had, was a rite of passage from boyhood into manhood, except you kind of made that for yourself in a way.
Yeah, I did. I guess for me, other boys might say, you know, you step into manhood.
Maybe that's what addiction can be, maybe in some ways, destruction.
Mine was maybe fighting, you know. I didn't have a dad that did that for me. You know, maybe some guys say they're a man when you're 18 or when you can drink or when you can join the military or different stuff. Like, we lost it a lot in our culture. Most boys don't get that. So for me, it was when I could be a pro fighter. You know, when I get in there, I'm a man now. And so I did that at 19. And but I don't know, like the thing that took me back into that deep, dark addiction was 2020, man. It's been hard for everybody. It was especially hard for me, and I'm not saying it's harder than anyone else's, but started the year off before COVID with getting a divorce. That was something I didn't see coming, and that we both know we needed. We both needed to heal individually. And so anyways, it was done in the most kind, gracious, loving way. Her family thanked me. I think my family thanked her.
Still crushing.
You don't get married to think you're ever going to get a divorce. So I felt like a failure, right? And I think I would have this performance wheel of like, you know, like for me, that's a big failure. And I wanted to be one of the only ones in my family ever to like stay married, right? And not go through 2, 3, or 4 marriages. And someone I really wanted to help, I couldn't. And someone she really wanted to help, she couldn't. And so we went through counseling for 2 years. During counseling, we realized, and her first, but then me on board too, that a divorce was the healthiest thing for us. And so, still a hard pill to swallow. We were counseled on how to get a divorce. That's why it went so smooth and so great. And the silver lining. But for 6 months, we're counseled into how to do it the right way. And I think that process went really well, but I still, COVID, I can't train. I'm divorced. I don't want to be at my place. Get rid of my place. I'm isolated. I'm isolating. Now I'm wanting to numb out, sedate. I thought I could have one joint, and for other people, you can have a joint and that's no big deal. But for me, one hit turned into a spiral of, I don't smoke weed like anybody else. It's every single inhale. I can smoke a pound in 2 weeks.
Do you eat it? Would you eat edibles?
Everything possible.
Are you Joey Diaz level of like?
I'm gonna smoke an ounce. I'm gonna eat all the edibles. I'm gonna do the dabs. I'm gonna have everything, and I have my med card, so I'm getting the strongest thing possible. And so, yeah, it just wasn't healthy, right? And so I spiral off into that. I end up admitting and confessing that I relapsed. They want to get me help. And just the place they chose at first, I wasn't vibing with it. I knew it was the best place in Oklahoma, but I knew people that had, I had a sponsor with AA, and I knew people that were using heroin there, at that treatment. You get your cell phone, you get your computer every night. It's a 110-acre ranch. You can go to Walmart 2 times a week. You can meet your dealer can throw it over the fence. And what day of the week you're going to get your test every time. So I was just that's not my place. And so, but they were pretty adamant I was going the next day, and it was just way too fast. I wanted to plan it out. I always try to surround myself with the best. And I was just no, there's got to be a better option. There's got to be a better way, a better place. But since I didn't have time, I ended up in Mexico. I decided instead of 6 a.m. being on a bus or a car to this other treatment center I didn't really have faith in, I decided to book a flight and end up in Cancun. Then I was headed down to Tulum. I thought I'd sit in some healing waters down there. But I stopped in Playa on the way. American soldier knew who I was, and him and I start hanging out. We get into some trouble and, just some drugs. And then all of a sudden our dealer is finding out I'm a pro fighter and that he's a soldier. And then all of a sudden we're with some of the cartel on the top of a penthouse.
This is on your way to rehab?
Yeah.
Essentially? Your detour?
Yeah, my detour was a big one. And with the cartel guys, it looked straight out of a movie, man. There's a waterfall up top, there's a jungle up top, but there's an infinity pool that's looking over the ocean, and there's here's a police officer, he's a corrupt guy, and here's the drug dealer. And
wow.
I'm wow. And so we bought some Oxy. Here's where the fentanyl might get in there, but I don't know it had any fentanyl in it. But I got Oxy 80s, a bunch of them. I mean, tons of them. And then I got...
That's a big pill.
It's a big pill. Normally you give 5 or 10 to people that get surgeries. That's what I was given, 5 and 10 and sometimes 20s. But I got a bunch of 80s. And then we felt like we scored, right? The addict mind, once it was set off, that trigger, that spree, it was here it is. This is what we were looking for. And then I got coke, a huge amount of cocaine, marijuana, what else?
Sounds like you got a bundle deal, more of a value pack.
Yeah, it was a value pack for sure. And they were telling me, hey man, we're dealers, not stealers. Because all of a sudden I said, do you guys happen to have Molly? And they started looking around and looking for MDMA. And all I had was ecstasy on the club scene, and I never had the pure stuff. So I was wanting to get the pure stuff. I'm if anyone's got it, these guys do, maybe. And this guy's balling.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
So, but they give me something, and it was this crystal of sorts, and said, here it is. And I said, all right, I'm partially colorblind. I didn't know it was pinkish reddish. Anyways, I take that. We go back. He's using, I'm using. And then I got in such a low, dark place. So did he. The love of his life that he saved up for bought this, $200,000 condo down there with a view. She says she's not coming. So he's in a deep, dark place. I'm in a deep, dark place. We separate. And then I'm hey, I need a couple days. In that couple days, I just decide I'm going to take 5 Oxy 80s, 5 of them.
At once?
At once. Snort them. And so I crushed
Sounds
them
like
up.
you're going to kill yourself.
Yeah, I decided to. Yeah. When I went down there, it was a one-way ticket. I wasn't really, I was open to coming back, but it was very, what would you call that? Not scripted, but it was very serendipitous. It just wasn't ironic. It was like, it was supposed to be this. I need to find a better word, where it was 4 flight attendants, 2 pilots, and me. It was COVID. Nobody else was flying. I was like the last flight out of Oklahoma City. And it was like, yeah, I don't want to take many people on this journey with me, right? And so was in a very negative headspace. Once the addiction hit me, it resurfaced. It resurfaced with such force and such a grip that I just knew I wasn't going to escape it. That's where I was. At least I felt that. And for me, suicide, to describe it, is almost like, the only way, I've told a couple people this, but it's like whenever I see the Twin Towers and they got hit by the planes, and the people above it, the people that are stuck in the smoke and the fire, and there's no way down. And they don't want to jump out of the building, but they have 2 options that they see. Here's stay in the burning building, suffocate and burn and die, which for me was my mind or this experience here on Earth. Or it was like, take the leap. And yeah, that is not a good option, but it's the better option. And so now I don't encourage that with anyone. It's now I see the veil's been lifted, where it's like, that's the most selfish act. And at least to me, I would have hurt so many people. I would have crushed my mom. I would have not been able to help the people that I've wanted to help for such a long time. Yeah, the Pygmies might not have known what had happened, but we started Fight for the Forgotten 2 years ago. We started bullying and suicide prevention. We had a girl come down and hand us her suicide letter and say, because you guys are here today, I'll be here tomorrow. We had another girl come crying, telling me that she just completed her suicide letter the class period before our assembly, where we shared our stories.
Whoa.
And it's like, wow, like we were supposed to be there. Like, this is part of my calling. This is part of my mission. And we've been able to impact over 100,000 students in schools, 22 million or something like that online last year. And it's like, man, like I was about to go down there. And I did, I guess to finish, like I did attempt suicide. 5 oxy 80s equals 400 milligrams, right? Which is broken down into the 5 milligrams. That's 80. That's 80.
Yeah, that's just nuts. I mean,
yeah, that's almost 3%.
Seems like an overdose to me.
Yeah. Well, I took 5 Xanax, 2 milligrams with that, the strongest Xannies.
Yeah.
And then at least the strongest ones I've seen and had. And then I had about a Sharpie size, like at least a little Sharpie size, like thick mound of cocaine that numbed everything up. And I drank about half a bottle of tequila. So that's a Hale-Bopp
recipe for a whole group right there. It'll take you down.
At treatment, they said there's no way I should be
I don't
here.
know how you survived.
So that's what they said. This is the only thing we can recollect. While everything was, how would I say that? While everything was coming to a close, getting dark and cold and numb, sound started to just kind of hum, and everything got darker. My mobility, my movement, like just my bodily function just slowed and everything was heavy. Everything was hard. I just remembered that I asked for that Molly and that crystal, like something whispered to me, take that. And so I did. I crushed it up and I snorted that in both nostrils, and it was the worst burn of my life. It was already numb from the coke, but this was the worst burn. It was like a chemical burn. It was awful. And I did this at about noon or 2 p.m. The next morning I woke up and to a gasp at 6 a.m. So this is like 16, 18 hours. What I found out at treatment was, and I went back and I asked the cartel guy, not the cartel guy, the big guy, but the one that brought us up there. I said, what was that crystal? Like, what was that I smashed up? And he goes, oh, you want some more of that? This was Ms. Molly, man. It was exactly what you asked for. I'm a dealer, not a stealer, bro. And I'm like, no. What was that? Like, I just knew it was something different. And he goes, oh, you want some more of that? you know? And I was like, well, maybe. Tell me what it was. And he goes, that's the strongest meth that we have here in Mexico. What I found out was it was red phosphorus methamphetamine. And so you can't even get that in the U.S. anymore. And that's the stuff that you use once and you can stay up for days or 6 days, 7 days. The guys at treatment that I was with, one guy used to bring it up from Mexico. He was family with some of the cartel and had like something like 12 guys die that he knew, family. And he was like, yeah, bro, that stuff is the devil. That stuff will he used to do it. And he used to sleep, he said 2 to 4 nights a month on the red phosphorus stuff. This guy's in his 50s. And used to
and
really
you snorted the whole line of it.
Yeah.
On top of everything else.
On top of everything else. And they say that's the only thing they can think of that kept my heart beating. And whenever I use something that should have kept me up for 5-6 days or several days, all of a sudden I passed out for 16 hours, maybe 18, anywhere from noon to 2 p.m. to not waking up till a gasp at 6 a.m. the next morning. That's the only thing that could have saved my life. And
that was this year?
April 5th. April 5th, 2020. And on April 6th, I ended up going and getting in the ocean. I was in Playa del Carmen. Like I could have almost spit and hit the water. The beach was real small. And I put my feet in the sand, and that kind of helped ground me a little bit. And then I went and I got in the water. And I wasn't even in swim trunks. I just went and got in, threw my shirt off, got in. And I sat there and I felt so much shame. And each wave that came over me was just like another wave of shame. Just shame. But there was a little bit of gratefulness, just a little bit. And it was almost like the waves, you know how they kind of come over you and then they can kind of leave? When it was leaving, it was almost like there's that gratefulness, just a little. And I started to connect with my breath, and I started thinking about the breath in my lungs. And I might have even started off saying that I'm so grateful for the breath in my lungs. That's the first time I said that was April 5th. The Pygmies pray that, by the way. They say, thank you. Thank you, God. Thank you, Creator. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you, ancestors, for the beating hearts in our chest. Thank you that today is a new day because many didn't wake up. Remember those that don't have food. Remember those without clean water. Remember those suffering. And now all of a sudden that became my prayer. I was like, thank you for the breath in my lungs. And I could feel the heart in my, like my heart beating. So it was probably the meth, right? So it was just pounding. And, I was like, thank you for this beating heart in my chest. And then all of a sudden it was like it switched where instead of the gratefulness leaving and the shamefulness washing over me, it was like all of a sudden gratefulness just crashed over me and with every wave. And then the shamefulness was just kind of leaving with everyone, like a little bit more shame would leave and more gratefulness would come over me. And then a little bit more shamefulness would leave until I was just so freaking grateful just to be breathing, just to be alive. And then it was like something whispered to me, like a spirit, just open your eyes. And when I did, I didn't hear the whisper, but it was in my mind, open your eyes. And whenever I did, bro, I promise it was 2 seconds later, if that, the sun broke over the horizon. And I watched the most gorgeous sunrise ever on this earth to me.
Rebirth. Yeah.
Yeah, man. It happened right in front of me. And I just started thinking, wow, this happens every day, twice a day. Like the God of the cosmos, the one that breathed the stars into existence, the star breather that holds the universe in place and holds me in place. He paints the sunrise and the sunset, this masterpiece, twice a day, and it was like the darkest night of my life, but also the light, because the sun came up and I'm in the water still, these cool healing waters. Now all of a sudden there's this warmth on my face and on my shoulders and neck. And man, I cried, and it was a rebirth without a shadow of a doubt. It was a rebirth.
What a beautiful, beautiful, vulnerable note to end on. I'm so honored by everyone who comes on the podcast and opens up with such vulnerability and truth and graces us with their own wisdom and gifts. Sharing our stories is important, and we need to keep learning how to listen to one another as we move into this new year, even especially those we don't quote-unquote agree with. We can understand our common ground and our shared humanity, that we're all trying to figure it out. And sometimes we absolutely make mistakes, and we can need to be called out on that sometimes, for sure. But we also need a lot of compassion and love. So on that note, I'm wishing you a happy new year and wishing you all the strength and grace and fortitude. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you for reviewing and subscribing. And thank you to everyone on our council on Patreon, patreon.com/EastForest. Happy New Year, my friends. Keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do it with grace.